They say blood is thicker than water, but they never mention that when greed rises to the surface, blood is the first thing to get stained. I am Margaret Thompson, 78 years old, sitting on the wraparound porch of my Victorian home in Charleston, South Carolina. The magnolia trees my late husband Robert planted 45 years ago are in full bloom, their cream-colored petals catching the late afternoon sun. This house, with its hand-carved banisters and original hardwood floors, has weathered hurricanes, renovations, and now something far more destructive than any storm nature could conjure. My daughter-in-law, Jessica, has always been the type of woman who could smile while sliding a knife between your ribs. When my son Michael first brought her home 15 years ago, I noticed how she cataloged every antique, every piece of jewelry, every valuable item in my home, with the precision of an appraiser. But Michael was smitten, and I held my tongue. After all, what mother wants to be accused of being the meddling mother-in-law? The early years were manageable. Jessica would visit with Michael and their twin boys, Tommy and Jake, bringing store-bought casseroles and expensive serving dishes, as if I hadn't been cooking for 6 decades. She would walk through my home, touching my grandmother's china with careless fingers, making comments about how everything was so old-fashioned. But she kept her claws mostly sheathed, waiting for the right moment to strike. That moment came after Robert's funeral 3 years ago. I remember standing in the cemetery, still numb from grief, when Jessica placed her manicured hand on my shoulder and said, "Margaret, you know you can't possibly manage that big house all alone. Michael and I have been talking, and we think it would be best if you moved into one of those lovely retirement communities. We could help you with all the arrangements." The audacity of discussing my future at my husband's graveside should have been my first real warning. But grief makes you vulnerable, and I was drowning in memories and loneliness. I mumbled something about needing time to think, and she squeezed my shoulder with what anyone watching might have mistaken for comfort. Over the following months, Jessica's campaign began in earnest. She would arrive unannounced with real estate pamphlets for senior living facilities, each one more expensive than the last. She would shake her head sadly at the peeling paint on my shutters, the creaky floorboards, the outdated kitchen appliances that Robert and I had lovingly maintained for decades. "Margaret, honey," she would say, her voice dripping with false concern, "this house is just too much for you now. Look at this beautiful community in Mount Pleasant. They have a golf course, and you'd have so many new friends. You wouldn't have to worry about anything." When subtle manipulation failed, Jessica escalated to more direct tactics. She began showing up with contractors, claiming they were friends of hers who could give me estimates on necessary repairs. Each estimate was astronomical, designed to frighten me into believing the house was falling apart around me. She would stand in my kitchen, pointing out every scuff mark, every slightly loose cabinet door, every sign of normal wear and tear, as if they were symptoms of a terminal illness. The turning point came when she brought Dr. Amanda Walsh to dinner one Sunday evening. Jessica introduced her as a geriatrician who specialized in helping seniors transition to appropriate care. Throughout the meal, Dr. Walsh asked me seemingly innocent questions about my daily routine, my memory, my ability to manage my medications. I felt like a specimen under a microscope. After dinner, while I was washing dishes, I overheard Dr. Walsh speaking quietly to Jessica in the living room. Her words made my blood freeze. "From what I observed tonight, she does seem to have some mild cognitive decline. Nothing severe, but enough to support your concerns about her living independently. I could write a preliminary assessment if needed." Jessica's response was like a slap across the face. "That would be perfect. Michael's been too soft about this. But we can't let sentiment put her in danger. Once we have something official, the lawyers can proceed." I stood at my kitchen sink, hands trembling as I gripped my grandmother's china plates, realizing that my own family was orchestrating my downfall with clinical precision. They had turned my vulnerability after Robert's death into their opportunity. They had weaponized my age, my solitude, and my natural moments of forgetfulness into evidence of incompetence. That night, I lay awake in the bed I had shared with Robert for 45 years, staring at the ceiling and facing a truth I had been avoiding for months. My son had become a stranger, and his wife was actively working to destroy me. The little boy who used to crawl into this same bed during thunderstorms, who had begged me to read him one more story, who had promised at his father's funeral that he would always take care of me, was now complicit in a scheme to take away everything I held dear. The next morning, I made the most important phone call of my life. Catherine Williams had been my closest friend since we were young mothers, pushing strollers in the same neighborhood. She had become a successful attorney, specializing in elder law, and she knew the tricks that predatory family members used better than anyone. "Margaret," she said, after I finished explaining everything, "come to my office this afternoon. Bring any legal documents you have, and bring that notebook you mentioned. We're going to fight this." Catherine's office was a fortress of law books and filing cabinets, and sitting across from her polished desk, I felt the first stirring of hope I had experienced in months. She listened as I recounted every manipulation, every calculated comment, every moment when Jessica had chipped away at my confidence and autonomy. "Here's what we're going to do," Catherine said, her voice sharp as steel. "First, we're going to get you an independent medical evaluation from a geriatrician I trust, someone who has no connection to Jessica or her friend. Second, we're going to review your financial documents and make sure everything is properly protected. And third, we're going to set some very clear boundaries that even someone as manipulative as Jessica can understand." The medical evaluation was thorough and vindicated my belief in my own competence. Dr. Elizabeth Morrison, a geriatrician with 30 years of experience, spent 3 hours with me, conducting cognitive tests, reviewing my medical history, and observing my daily routines. Her report was unambiguous. I was mentally sharp, physically capable, and perfectly able to live independently. Armed with this ammunition, Catherine and I prepared for what we knew would be a confrontation. We didn't have to wait long. The following Sunday, Jessica arrived with Michael and a manila folder that she placed on my dining room table with theatrical importance. "Margaret," she began, her voice taking on that patronizing tone I had grown to despise. "Michael and I have been consulting with lawyers about the best way to protect you and your assets. We think it would be wise for you to sign a power of attorney, giving us the authority to make decisions about your care and finances. It's really just a formality, but it would give us the legal standing to help you when you need it." I looked at my son, searching his face for any sign of the boy I had raised, but he couldn't meet my eyes. He had become Jessica's puppet, dancing to her tune while she pulled the strings. "I've already consulted with my own attorney," I said quietly, watching Jessica's perfectly composed expression flicker for just a moment. "And I've had a complete medical evaluation. I'm afraid your concerns about my competency are unfounded." Jessica's mask slipped completely then. Her sweet smile vanished, replaced by something cold and calculating. "Margaret, you're being stubborn and unrealistic. This house is too much for you, and if you won't listen to reason, we'll have to explore other options." "Other options?" I asked, though I already knew what she meant. "Guardianship proceedings," she said bluntly. "If you're not competent to make rational decisions about your welfare, the court can appoint someone to make them for you." Number 4. The threat hung in the air like smoke. Michael shifted uncomfortably in his chair, finally meeting my eyes. In that moment, I saw shame there, but also fear. Jessica had trapped him as surely as she had tried to trap me, using his love for his children and his weakness for an easy life to make him complicit in her schemes. "I think it's time for you both to leave," I said, standing up from my own dining room table with as much dignity as I could muster. "And Jessica, if you ever threaten me again, If you ever question my competency again, if you ever try to manipulate my son against me again, you will discover that 78 years of life has taught me things about fighting that you can't even imagine." Jessica's face flushed red, but she gathered her folder and her composure. As they left, I heard her hissing at Michael in the driveway, her carefully modulated voice finally revealing its true venom. The weeks that followed were the loneliest of my life. Michael stopped calling. The grandchildren stopped visiting. Jessica had poisoned the well so thoroughly that even my own family believed I was becoming difficult and irrational in my old age. There were moments, usually late at night, when I questioned whether they might be right. Was I being stubborn? Was I endangering myself by insisting on independence? But then I would walk through my home, touching the furniture Robert had restored, looking at the photos of our life together, tending to the garden we had planted with our own hands. And I would remember who I was. I was not the weak, confused old woman Jessica wanted everyone to believe I was. I was a woman who had raised 3 children, who had managed our family's finances for decades, who had nursed Robert through his final illness with grace and strength. Catherine helped me establish new routines and safeguards. I arranged for regular check-ins with trusted neighbors, updated my will with ironclad provisions that protected my wishes, and even installed security cameras after we suspected Jessica was trying to get into my house when I wasn't home. The vindication came sooner than I expected. Mrs. Henderson, my neighbor across the street, called me one Thursday morning with information that made my heart race. She had seen Jessica parking down the block and walking up to my house the previous afternoon while I was at my book club meeting. The security camera footage showed Jessica trying different windows, testing door handles, and even attempting to peer into my garage. When Catherine saw the footage, her smile was predatory. "This changes everything, Margaret. Breaking and entering, attempted burglary, stalking behavior. Jessica has just handed us the evidence we need to not only protect you, but to ensure she never tries this again." The confrontation I had been dreading finally came to my front door on a Saturday morning. Jessica arrived with Michael and 2 men I didn't recognize, claiming they were there to help me pack for my move to a retirement community I had never agreed to enter. "Margaret," Jessica said, pushing past me into my own foyer, "we've found you a lovely place at Sunset Manor. They have an opening today, and we've already paid the deposit. The movers will be here this afternoon." The sheer audacity of it took my breath away. They had planned to simply remove me from my own home, like unwanted furniture. Michael stood behind his wife, his face a mask of misery. But he said nothing in my defense. "I'm not going anywhere," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "This is my home, and you have no authority to remove me from it." Jessica's laugh was sharp and cruel. "Margaret, we've spoken to the courts. Given your recent behavior, your increasing confusion, and the safety concerns about you living alone, we can have you removed for your own protection." That was when I played my final card. "Jessica," I said, reaching for the phone, "I think you should know that I have security cameras installed throughout this property. They've been recording your unauthorized visits, including your attempt to break into my house last Thursday. I also have recorded conversations from the past several months, including your discussion with Dr. Walsh about fabricating medical concerns for legal purposes." The color drained from Jessica's face. The 2 men she had brought with her suddenly looked very uncomfortable and began backing toward the door. Even Michael seemed to understand, finally, what his wife had been doing. "You're bluffing," Jessica said, but her voice had lost its confident edge. 8. "Catherine Williams, my attorney, has copies of everything," I continued. "She's also prepared to file charges for attempted fraud, elder abuse, and breaking and entering. The police are just a phone call away." Jessica's composure cracked completely then. She began screaming about how I was a bitter old woman, how I was keeping Michael from his inheritance, how I was being selfish and vindictive. The mask had finally fallen away, revealing the ugly truth underneath. But it was Michael's reaction that broke my heart. Instead of defending me, instead of apologizing for what his wife had tried to do, he simply stood there, torn between his mother and his manipulative wife, and chose silence. "Get out of my house," I said quietly. "All of you, and don't come back until you're ready to treat me with the respect I deserve." The silence that followed their departure was deafening, but it was also cleansing. For the first time in years, my home felt truly mine again. I walked through each room, touching familiar objects, breathing air that wasn't thick with tension and hidden agendas. The legal aftermath was swift and decisive. Catherine's documentation was overwhelming. And when faced with potential criminal charges, Jessica's lawyer advised her to sign an agreement promising to cease all contact with me unless specifically invited. The fabricated medical assessment was exposed, resulting in professional consequences for Dr. Fadjan Walsh. Most importantly, my legal right to make my own decisions was formally recognized and protected. Michael eventually came to see me, alone, 3 months later. He sat on my porch like a penitent child, his face etched with shame and regret. We talked for hours about how he had let his wife's ambition blind him to what was right, how his desire to avoid conflict had made him complicit in her cruelty. "I was scared, Mom," he finally admitted. "Scared of losing the kids, scared of losing my marriage, scared of disappointing Jessica. But I ended up disappointing the most important person in my life instead. Our relationship will never be what it once was. Trust, once broken, is like a bone that heals, but always aches in cold weather. But we are slowly building something new, something based on honesty rather than obligation, respect rather than manipulation." Jessica and I maintain a careful distance. She is still married to my son, still the mother of my grandchildren, but she knows that her power over me is permanently broken. When family gatherings occur, she is polite but wary, like a predator who has learned that their intended prey has claws. The children visit me now, without their mother's supervision, and I am teaching them the same lessons I once taught their father about honesty, integrity, and standing up for what is right. They are old enough now to understand that strength isn't about dominance, but about knowing your own worth and protecting it. My home remains mine, filled with memories and maintained by my own choices. I have a cleaning lady who comes twice a week, not because I need her, but because I choose to employ her. I have a gardener who helps with the heavier work, not because Jessica arranged it, but because I hired him myself. Every decision is mine, every change is my choice, every day is lived on my own terms. Some evenings, I sit on this same porch where I am now, watching the sun set behind Robert's magnolia trees, and I think about the woman I was 3 years ago. She was scared, lonely, and slowly disappearing under the weight of other people's expectations and manipulations. She was becoming a ghost in her own life, fading away one compromise at a time. But she fought back, not with anger or revenge, but with quiet determination and the support of true friends. She reclaimed her voice, her choices, and her dignity. She learned that being alone is not the same as being lonely, and that independence at 78 can be more liberating than dependence at any age. They wanted to bury me alive in my own home, to make me a prisoner of their good intentions and greedy schemes. But they forgot that this house was built on love, and its walls were raised with honor. You can't buy a legacy in Charleston. No matter how much money you have, you earn it through the choices you make and the courage you show when those choices are tested. My legacy isn't this house, beautiful as it is. My legacy is the truth that even when you're 78, even when you're alone, even when your own family turns against you, you still have the power to say no. You still have the strength to fight for what matters. You still have the right to live and die on your own terms. The magnolia petals will fall soon, as they do every year, carpeting my lawn with their gentle beauty before making way for new growth. But the trees remain strong, their roots deep, their branches reaching toward the sky, just like me.